The smell of cocoa nibs roasting drifted through Rue des Forges, long before daylight painted the shutters gold. Colette Dumas unlocked the wrought iron gate of Les Petits Miracles, her chocolate atelier, and stepped into the hush that used to feel like company when her husband, Etienne, was alive. 3 years had passed since a fever took him, yet the shop still breathed with the soft thumps of memories. The click of his shoes on the tiled floor, the steam-kissed laughter that rose when a ganache emulsified just right. Colette set her basket of Tahitian vanilla beans on the marble counter and told herself, as she did every morning, that delight could still be coaxed from sorrow if she tempered it patiently enough. Across town, Gabriel Vidal wrestled a cello-sized violin case into the back seat of his weather-worn Peugeot, while his 8-year-old son, Luc, tried to buckle a wayward shoelace. Luc's mother had left for an orchestra contract in Buenos Aires 2 springs ago, promising postcards that never arrived. Gabriel, once first chair with the Lyon Philharmonic, now freelanced at weddings, restaurants, and children's workshops, in between substitute teaching at the conservatory. Music paid the bills unevenly, but it was also the language in which he and Luc still believed in tenderness. This particular morning, they were due at the Maison de la Culture to discuss a Valentine's Day project the Arts Council had advertised as a multi-sensory love letter to the town. The council's curator, an energetic retiree named Brigitte Lemonnier, introduced Colette and Gabriel in the shadow of a half-assembled stage. "Taste and sound, my dears," she declared, clapping her clipboard like a metronome. "We want an evening where people can hear the actual shape of a cherry cordial and taste the blue note in a sonata. You two are my alchemists." Colette smoothed an errant curl behind her ear, self-conscious in her cocoa-stained apron amid so many velvet instrument cases. Gabriel bowed, partly out of habit, partly because he sensed sincerity behind her shy smile. They sat together at a folding table scattered with sheet music and recipe cards. At first, their conversation tiptoed, the way strangers do when neither wishes to bruise the air with presumption. Colette explained how cacao percentages could mimic emotional gradients: 72% for melancholy, 55% for flirtation, white chocolate for nostalgia, though only if balanced with citrus to cut the sweetness. Gabriel, in turn, described harmonic tension, how a G minor chord could ache like winter sunlight through dusty glass, and how resolving to E-flat major felt like standing in a field after rain. Luc, meanwhile, colored hearts on the margin of a program draft and occasionally interrupted with practical considerations. "Will there be strawberry pieces? My papa says strawberries are violins in disguise because they both have little seeds." By noon, they had sketched the bones of the showcase. 5 movements, each pairing a chocolate with a short arrangement. The evening would begin in darkness, a single square of 90% cacao melting on every tongue, while Gabriel sustained an open-string drone that tremored like restrained grief. The second course would spark lanterns of candied ginger and yuzu as pizzicato danced overhead. Midway, a milk chocolate praline would accompany a waltz rewritten in 5/4 to suggest lovers tripping over their own eagerness. The crescendo, raspberry-infused dark truffles rolled in hibiscus powder, while Gabriel unleashed Saint-Saëns' Rondo Capriccioso, a piece so effervescent Colette sometimes wept listening to it. Finally, a hush, white chocolate jasmine bonbons dissolving to a pianissimo harmonics coda, a reminder that even happiness must exhale. They broke for lunch at a nearby bistro. Over soupe à l'oignon, Colette confessed that Etienne had been the public face of Les Petits Miracles, I was always the one in the back tempering chocolate, she said, tracing circles on the rim of her bowl. He charmed customers. Without him, I'm pages without a cover. Gabriel tapped a rhythmic pattern on the table with his spoon. You know, in chamber music, the second violin often guides the ensemble from the middle voices, he said. Invisible, yet essential. She looked up, startled, to feel understood in a dialect she hadn't realized she spoke. Luke slurped broth and offered, Papa gets nervous too, but he just plays the first note. After that, the music looks after him. Colette laughed, and the sound startled her with its own brightness. Gabriel decided then that if he could coax that laugh into the performance hall, the audience would leave changed. Over the next 4 weeks, their lives braided together in rehearsals, fragrant with sugar bloom and resin dust. Colette installed a portable induction hob in the auditorium's green room and experimented with fillings while Gabriel practiced on stage. Sometimes she'd carry a still warm truffle to the footlights and whisper, Close your eyes. Tell me what key this tastes like. His answers grew uncannily precise. A honey lavender ganache was C major with a raised fourth. A salted caramel was D minor flirting with F. When he suggested she add crushed pink peppercorn to the strawberry pâte de fruits, calling the sensation a grace note, she obliged and discovered the candy stopped being polite and started being audacious. Luke appointed himself chief taste tester. He invented names like Fortissimo Fudge and Dolce Decrescendo Draghi. Between bites, he scampered through rows of empty seats, bowing to imaginary applause, his child soprano giggles filling the vaulted ceiling where Colette's doubts used to echo. One evening, a January snowstorm postponed rehearsal. Power flickered in Colette's shop, so Gabriel and Luke arrived bearing candles and a thermos of mulled wine. As snow feathered the windowsill, Gabriel drew his violin and offered to play while she worked. Colette tempered chocolate on the marble slab, folding it like dusk against the snow's hush, while Gabriel's bow sang Bach's Chaconne, the aria's solemn architecture interlaced with the sliding sheen of cocoa, and something fragile but resilient unfurled inside her, an understanding that grief and beauty could cohabitate, neither canceling the other. After Luke fell asleep on a sack of cocoa beans, they spoke in hushed tones. Gabriel shared how he sometimes feared being both mother and father, that his son's future hinged on melodies he might not be able to afford. Colette told him Etienne used to whistle the same tune each time he cracked the mold off a batch of caramels, a tune she now avoided because silence felt safer than an unfinished duet. Gabriel lifted his violin and played the whistle's melody, gentle as a question. Colette's eyes brimmed, yet for once the tears tasted more like gratitude than salt. The weeks tumbled forward. Posters for the Symphony des Sons appeared in shop windows, depicting a violin curved into the shape of a cocoa pod. Tickets sold out. Local press requested interviews, which Colette nervously redirected to Gabriel until he insisted they answer together. During the radio spot, the host asked how they defined Valentine's Day. Colette said, "It's the willingness to taste someone else's silence." Gabriel added, "And to hear someone else's sweetness." The host, unexpectedly moved, forgot his next question. Dress rehearsal arrived on February 13th. The hall transformed into a nocturne of red velvet drapes, candlelit aisles, and the faint, constant susurration of tempered chocolate setting in heart-shaped molds. Colette's brigade of apprentices arranged plates beneath cloches so the aroma would bloom only at cue. Gabriel's fingers, calloused yet sensitive, hovered over strings that had been newly strung with gut to deepen warmth. Brigitte paced adamantly with a stopwatch. Anything that could misbehave, lighting cues, duct-taped extension cords, A rogue air vent did so. In the chaos, Colette's anxiety crescendoed. She miscounted cream for the jasmine ganache and had to start over, wasting precious couverture. Then a chorus of cellophane bags toppled, scattering rose petal garnish like confetti. Watching her shoulders tighten, Gabriel set his violin down, strode backstage, and lightly pressed 2 fingers to her wrist. "Breathe in 4, out 4, he instructed. She obeyed. The pulse steadied. He wrapped a stray curl behind her ear, a gesture so simple it seemed ordained. Neither spoke, but the moment became a silent vow. "We've done harder things than this." The jasmine batch turned out even silkier the second time. On the afternoon of February 14th, the sky thawed to a soft periwinkle. When the first guests arrived, they were guided to tables instead of rows, each place setting adorned with a sealed envelope instructing them not to open it until the final movement. Lights dimmed. Gabriel stepped onto the stage, bow poised, while Colette awaited beside a console of cloches, her thumb on a switch that would release the first chocolates sent through discreet vents. The performance unfolded like a shared heartbeat. The opening bitterness paired with the droning strings invited the audience into the tender ache of yearning. Some closed their eyes, some let tears gleam unashamed. When candied ginger followed a playful arpeggio, laughter sprinkled across tables. Through it all, Colette watched Gabriel. Under the glow of footlights, his face seemed both younger and wiser, lines shaped by responsibility softened by joy. Every time his bow changed direction, she felt her own breath follow, as if his music had extended her lungs. During the raspberry hibiscus crescendo, Gabriel glanced toward her. Their eyes met mid-surge, and the hall swelled with resonance that came from neither string nor palette, but from a place where flavor and sound were mere dialects of the same emotion. Colette lifted the final cloche with fingers that no longer trembled. White chocolate jasmine bonbons perfumed the room like a field at dawn. Gabriel drew the last harmonic, a shimmer that lingered, the way déjà vu hangs on the edge of waking. Silence arrived, luminous and absolute. Brigitte gave a small cough, the signal to instruct guests to open their envelopes. Inside each lay a paper heart, dusted with cocoa, and a question handwritten by Luc. "What note does love taste like to you?" Murmurs spread as couples, friends, and strangers compared answers. Some wrote C major, others salted caramel. One child scribbled, "The squeak my shoes make on snow." The hall had transformed into a confession booth of tenderness, exactly what Brigitte had hoped but could never have scripted. Applause rose, rowdy and sustained. Colette and Gabrielle bowed side by side. Luc bounded between them to take an exaggerated courtly bow that earned its own ovation. Yet the loudest applause, Colette reflected, was the private thunder inside her ribcage, a standing ovation for the possibility of again believing in more than memory. After the house lights brightened and patrons filtered out, staff began clearing plates. Brigitte hugged them, eyes gleaming, then scooted away to negotiate an encore performance for next year. Luc chased fallen rose petals while sipping melted chocolate from a demi-tasse. Gabriel and Colette lingered on stage, amid cables and stray programs. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Like a curtain has opened," she replied, "and not just the velvet one." They sat on the edge of the stage. Through the doors, winter night glowed with the promise of spring. Gabriel removed a small velvet pouch from his coat. "I made something for you," he said, suddenly bashful. From it, he drew a rosin cake, into which he'd embedded tiny shards of caramelized sugar. "When you polish your strings with it, the rosin will smell like your shop. I thought maybe music could remember chocolate the way we remember music." Colette held the gift as if it were spun glass. "I have something too," she said, reaching into her apron. She produced a single truffle tied with a ribbon of edible gold leaf. Elegie, she whispered, bitter orange to honor what we've lost, but honey to show what we've found. They traded offerings, each suddenly aware of how intimate a gesture it was to give the other's art back as a keepsake. Without rehearsal or prelude, Gabriel leaned forward, and Colette met him halfway. The kiss tasted of jasmine and carried the faint, resinous undertone of pine, like the hush after a final chord, when all that remains is the promise of what comes next. Luke's sneakers squeaked behind them. "Papa, Colette, are we going for crepes like you promised?" he asked, oblivious to the new orbit forming around him. Gabriel glanced at Colette, whose cheeks bloomed a color warmer than any ruby chocolate. "Yes," she said, standing. "But first, I need your professional opinion. I'm thinking of a lime pistachio duet. Will you help me figure out if it's in the key of adventure?" Luke cheered and took her hand. Gabriel lifted his violin case, feeling lighter than he had in years. Outside, the town square shimmered with fairy lights, strung for the holiday. But in the reflection of the shop windows, Gabriel saw a different illumination. The three of them walking toward a cafe, footprints interlacing in fresh snow. The curious melody of a future neither had dared to orchestrate alone. Later that night, long after Luke had fallen asleep in the back booth of the creperie with chocolate smudged on his chin, Colette and Gabriel lingered over shared cider. They spoke of small things. Her plan to plant citrus trees in pots behind the atelier, his dream of composing a suite for children who think in colors. They also spoke of larger things, what it means to rebuild without forgetting, how love is less a miraculous flourish than a series of deliberate notes and measured ingredients. As they parted under the flickering street lamp, Gabriel realized that the showcase had not been about Valentine's Day at all. It had been a rehearsal for the everyday symphony of showing up, listening, tasting, and beginning again. In the months that followed, patrons returned de Les Petits Miracles not merely for chocolate, but for the possibility that each confection contained a chord only they could hear. Gabriel's new compositions carried hints of cocoa and sometimes a grain of sugar snapped beneath the bow, releasing a tiny, unexpected sparkle in the timbre. When spring finally unfurled lilac across the rooftops, Colette and Gabrielle inaugurated an open-air series in the courtyard. Saturdays in Sync, where children drizzled chocolate on crepes while music curled through the air like steam. Sometimes Colette still awoke, reaching for a hand that wasn't there, and sometimes Gabriel, mid-rehearsal, feared the silence left by a missing second violin. But they shared those pauses now. And when the rests became too heavy, they would walk to the river with Luke, skip stones, and plan a new flavor against a new melody, trusting that water knows how to carry stones without sinking. One evening, nearly a year after their first collaboration, Colette closed the shop and found Gabriel waiting outside with 3 train tickets to Paris. "The conservatory invited us to replicate the showcase," he said. "They want chocolate on stage. They want us." Colette laughed that bright, unguarded laugh, and Luke performed an impromptu jig. They would go, of course they would. But they both understood the invitation was only a coda. The true composition played on, measure by measure, in the ordinary days. The clink of spoons, the scrape of a bow, and the simple miracle of 2 widowed hearts discovering they could rise, temper, and bloom again in perfect temperamento